few minutes, and thank you for your patience. We're still start.
Said I was done, but see I'm here.
Institution. We work along the lines of policy, the arts, and business, and our main goal is narrative change around the continent of Africa. So for us, we think it's important what kind of information gets to shape the world's understanding of the place and its people, but also who gets to do that shaping. And so as part of our work, we like to center African perspectives in conversations about Africa. And through that work, we put on public programs such as this one. To tonight's conversation, tonight's program is a conversation between world-renowned poet and author Ben Okri, who has been world-renowned for about as long as I've been alive. I just realized. I think we all he's received acclaim for many of his works, most notably winning the Man Booker Prize in 1991 for his work *The Famished Road*, and as well, and he'll be joined in conversation today by Uzodinma Iweala, the CEO of the Africa Center, and also my boss, so I'm obligated to say some nice things about him. He's a very tall man. Without further ado, please welcome to the stage Uzodinma Iweala and Ben Okri. don't know. I don't know why I did that to you.
Am I on?
You're on. Okay,
I
great.
think I'm on.
Good evening, folks. How are you all today? I like a good crowd. You know, despite the rain and this funky weather, everybody's in a really good mood, and I know it's because we're here with a literary hero. And I actually want to start there because you know, I was just telling Ben earlier when we were just chatting that he and I met for the first time in 2007 or 2008 in Stavanger, Norway, at a literary festival. And it was quite the festival. I don't even remember some of the things that went down, but I was too starstruck to really even say much more than hi, because The Famished Road was one of the books that like pushed me as a reader. And I would have been probably 14 when I read it first. And I was so blown away.
A bit of a prodigy, yes.
Not at all. Not at all. But I was so blown away that by the language, by the just the creativity, that I wanted to become a writer. I wanted to do what you do. Like that was one of the books that you and Nadine Gordon are actually two writers that like I wanted to do that, and I wanted to do nothing more than that. And you know, the last line of your book, The Famished Road, is one that I have taped up on my wall. I'm just fanboying here, so y'all give me a second. I'll land the point because I think it is such a driver, and I actually want to start there. How many people have read The Famished Road? And for those of you who haven't, I'm not going to spoil it, but you know the line I'm talking about. And that is a line that I think really gets to the heart of this idea of creativity. And I want to start there. You know, this idea of, first of all, let's talk about creativity. Let's talk about creativity from an African point of view. And then let's talk about the power of that creativity. I would say that your creativity is so powerful, it inspired me and so many others, but let's talk about creativity.
Well, I think the first thing about creativity is gratitude. And I want to say how grateful I am to be here. What a pleasure it is. I had a little bit of trouble getting here because of my taxi driver went to the wrong place. I don't know how I managed that, but here we are. And I've heard so much about the Africa Center. There is an Africa Center in London, but it's this Africa Center that everyone talks about. And it's a real joy to be here to celebrate your achievement. Creativity and Africa. If you ask me, I would say maybe, if you ask me one of the most fundamental things about the African spirit, I would say family, a sense of family, and family in the widest sense of the word, to include ancestors and the unborn and people who are present and people who are not even members of the family but have entered the family. Our sense of family is very expansive, very generous. The other thing I'll say is a sense of ritual. We have this gift for ritualizing life. And that is so important to understanding us. And alongside ritual, parallel to ritual, I would say creativity. I would say creativity is so central to the African spirit that we don't even call it that. We call it many other things, but that's what it is. We're creative in the way we deal with time. Don't laugh. We're creative in the way we define friendship and family. We're creative in our perception of politics. We're creative in our perception of power and poverty. We're creative in our perception of compassion, hospitality. The creativity I'm talking about just seeps through all the dimensions of our lives. It just means that we constantly multiply. Because for me, creativity is a multiplication of something from nothing, really. Creativity is the magnification, making when we went through a difficult phase in my family, when my dad's kind of fortunes took a nosedive a bit for a while, and I'd watch mom make a really gorgeous stew out of nothing. That's creativity too. How to have a sense of a festival, of a carnival, even with what seems like very little, And that creativity that I'm talking about, this thing that runs through all of our lives, the way in which we celebrate sunlight and rain, we celebrate things, even the bad things that happen to us, we find a way to make something out of it. Many of our proverbs are about making something out of difficult circumstances. That's the creativity I was drawing upon when I wrote The Famished Road. Not the European idea of creativity, which is you get a canvas and then you dip a brush and then you paint something, and that's creativity in a very fixed sense. For me, creativity is about the celebration of life, and life, by its very nature, by its very definition, tends towards multiplicity, tends towards more. I tell people this story about Nigeria, growing up in Nigeria. You drop an orange seed anywhere, it grows. It doesn't have to fall on the earth. It just grows. I've seen the sides of table sprout. Yeah, that's creativity. Our universe is bursting with energies. Just sometimes we use it in the wrong way. We use our creativity for a negative kind of politics. We use our creativity for negative development of our societies, but it's all the same thing. And I think if we harness that, when the time comes that we harness that in the right direction, I think Africa would soar.
Right. So I want to come back to the idea of negative uses of creativity, because I think there's something really interesting there in terms of where we are in the world right now, in terms of our politics, etc. But you mentioned something, or you essentially said that creativity it's almost like a vein, it's a seam that runs through, it's a force. So when did you first tap into that force, as opposed to being, put in a room and told, you're going to paint, you're going to write? When did you feel it start moving through you? And how did you feel it start moving through you?
I don't know. I think it began early. Because writing wasn't the first thing I wanted to do. I wanted to compose, I wanted to make music, I wanted to be a scientist. I studied physics at school. I thought I was going to be an innovator. I think Elon Musk stole my destiny in a way.
Hopefully not too much of it. Because where he is now, we don't want to be.
No. I'm just talking about just the sheer love of invention. Yeah. When I was a kid, I had the idea of a jacket that could also be a radio, that could also be a, and then you realize that many of the stories of the spirit world growing up already has that kind of inventiveness. We have that kind of futurism in our perception of the spirit world, but we leave it over there. When in fact the spirit world and its inventiveness is part of us. So for me, it came with when I went to university to be admitted to do physics at the age of 14, and they took one look at me and said, where's your father? And I said, no, it's me who's come for this. And they said, go home, let your mother's milk dry on your head. So I went back home, discovered my dad's library, and read my way out of physics and into literature.
Wow. So now I have this, I think we can clap for that. I think that's it. So now I have this question that must come, which is physics and literature, how similar, how different? And, if you were a physics nerd, so to speak, turned into literary nerd, what are the things that you draw from one that you now find in your writing, or that you draw from another that helps you think about the world around us, the material world?
Well, the thing I got most from physics is rigor.
Mm.
You can't fake thought experiments. You can't fake anything in an experiment, and you have to be responsible. You have to be very detailed and very responsible in your notes about an experiment, because if you deviate one little bit, then what you deduce from it will be flawed. So basically, it's rigor, discipline, great rigor, great discipline. The study of physics taught me to think straight. It's the hardest thing in the world, because when you start to write, writing is so compelling, and the imagination is so willful, that you start the story and a man's going down the street and he sees this woman, and the woman looks at him, and already you've already started to deviate. By its very nature, the right is to deviate. Because ideas give rise to metaphors, metaphors give rise to ideas, ideas give rise to, and it's a constant. To keep yourself on a straight road of the story you set out to tell is one of the most difficult things. And so rigor and clarity of thinking is what I got from science. And so it's maybe the best thing I got.
So it's funny, in my own practice, a lot of my discipline, I think, comes from having studied medicine and having that feeling of you have to follow a certain path. And that doesn't mean that there's no creativity there. It just means that when you sit your butt down, you are going to get to the end of your story. So
to qualify that, we come from a land of tremendous richness, and also tremendous chaos.
Right.
Yeah. So we've got the chaos and we've got the richness. You take that richness and take that chaos and hurl it into the spirit of art. And what you've got is a potential for works to fly all over the place. Now, I've discovered, the more chaos, the more order you must have. You know, you have to, if you balance your chaos with your order, you will create masterpieces.
Right.
That is where the real greatness comes from. There are many lands, they don't have this chaos. They just have this order, and their masterpieces are very dry and lean and thin. And you can't really get a good meal out of them. But they're masterpieces of the spirit nonetheless.
Right.
You know, but the more richness, the more chaos, the clearer and the tougher you have to be in your thinking.
Right.
So I really want to make sure we bring the two things together.
Yeah.
Chaos is vital. Chaos is like the rich nutrients of the soil. I love chaos.
Yeah.
And I think creativity, I think the kind of writing I do, the kind of writing I'm fascinated by, to not have the chaos to draw upon is almost tragic. I love that chaos. I love that richness.
Right.
And I think chaos has got great potential, more potential than the absence of chaos, because the chaos means that you've got worlds that you can make. It means you've got where other people make one thing, you can make 10.
Right. Right. So now I think
Is this being recorded?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So now we have to ask.
Because you're pulling all of this stuff out of me.
I mean, this is why we're here, right? So, but I think we would all want to know then, how you, in your practice, how do you take that chaos, and how do you, I don't want to say harness it, but how do you interact with it? What is your practice of writing, of making poems, of sitting down to write a book? What does that look like?
Well, I prefer to create chaos first.
Okay.
I'm serious. I like to go wild first. So my first drafts are they're really crazy. I've read some of my first drafts to friends who knew me at the time, and they said, you need to see somebody. And I said, no, I don't. I just need to be a better writer. That's the somebody I need to see.
Right.
And to this day, I prefer to splurge. For me, the first draft of writing is an act of the unconscious. It's an act of of a bursting out of a world. I have, you know, I was at MoMA today and looking at some of those abstract expressionists of the 40s and thinking of the great Dripper, Jack the Dripper, as they called him. And I was thinking of this expressionism first, to express first, and then to shape. The shaping is the most difficult thing. It's the hardest thing,
Right.
because you have to get rid of so much. That's a phone call from.
So I'm gonna let me
from the universe.
take a moment, and folks can maybe turn off their phones or put them on silent.
Nice.
While we're here, and just be present and here. But Ben, back to you.
Yeah. So the two things that we as writers dislike most. One is getting rid of. You know, you have these beautiful things that you've poured onto the page, and you have to lose them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes your own beauty can get in the way of your own truth.
Right.
So it's hard to be tough enough to throw out gold,
Right.
just so that the seed can grow.
So that's one of the two things, and the second thing is
That'll come later.
okay. All right.
But tell them about your practice.
Oh no, this is not about me.
Yeah, but I want to hear about your practice.
I mean, my practice is probably a bit more, I would say, constrained in that sense. But it's interesting that you say this, because I was talking with my students about how we create, and we actually had Nnedi Okorafor speak to the class, who spoke, you know, very much about this idea of the chaos draft. And the shaping. And I think that I'm probably a little bit more structured. I tend to outline
Right,
first,
right.
and then write to the outline, and then undo. So I think there's a little bit, you know, and I raised the question in class. I wonder how much my final product would change if my initial process were a little less constrained, and where I would get to, and whether there's a fear there, or, you know, whether it's a fear of the unknown, a fear of wildness, or whether it's just, you know, constraints of time.
No, I think our creativity kind of is aligned with our fundamental character, with our fundamental spirit. Everybody's different.
Right.
I know some writers, they perfect every sentence before they go to the next sentence.
Right.
And they perfect each part. And I say, but how do you know where you're going? He says, I'm not worried about where I'm going. I'm just worried that this sentence be perfect.
Right.
And it's agonizing for them, because they're constantly polishing this bit here, and then this bit afterwards. And I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
But that's what works for them.
Right.
They've tried other ways. It doesn't work for them. This is, you know, our creativity is in tune with our neurosis.
Right.
And I'm using that word deliberately.
Yeah.
Because creativity and neurosis are linked.
Very much so.
You know, no neurosis, no creativity. If you're perfect and happy and healthy and everything is great for you and you're completely sorted out, you're not going to write one decent thing on this planet.
So
I'm sorry.
I'm interested now in whether you write by hand or with computer, because I write
By computer.
only by hand.
Oh, right.
Actually,
Okay.
because of what you just said, if I were to write with a computer, I would delete. Whereas if you write by hand in ink, you can't. You have to cross out. So you just have to keep going. And that's how I keep myself going. And then I type, and then I rewrite, and I type, and I rewrite. So
I've always handwritten.
yeah.
I think being wild, handwritten is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like dreaming with your who said that? Bless you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a handwriter as well.
So let's talk a little bit before we get to maybe a little bit of some words of yours. Let's talk a little bit about the negative aspect of creativity, because we talked about the positive aspect, but also in this world in which we live, I think we're seeing quite a bit of negative impacts of creativity. You know, whether you want to call it late stage capitalism, whether you want to call it some of the quote unquote creative destruction that is going on in the world, whether you want to say Ukraine, coups across our continent. How, and you even mentioned some of the negative creativity that goes into the governance of certain places, or perhaps the absence of governance. And I don't, I use both of those terms very deliberately. I turn over to you into this idea of the negative power of creativity. Is it necessary? And then, is it a fight to undo it, or is that part of the creation of chaos that allows for a very rich life?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think the negative creativity here are all the ways in which we use our tremendous intelligence and our gifts, our gift for improvisation, our gifts for persuasion, our gifts for making 3 and 3 become 12. We use it. So far we've not been using it for the beautification of our societies.
Right.
Our negative creativity comes out in our corruption, comes out in the various forms of injustices that a society perpetrates on its citizens, the bad roads, the absence of hospitals. All of that is negative creativity because the money is there, the vision is there, the will is there, but it's been distorted and it's gone somewhere else.
Right.
You look at smaller societies that had oil, and you look at Nigeria, and you look at what Nigeria did with it, you look at what smaller societies did with it, and you see straight away that, we have the resources, we have the intelligence, we have the gifts, we have everything that we need.
Right.
Yeah. Except this negative creativity that I'm talking about. And politics, I think we forget to say how much politics reflects the true creativity of a people. And it does. The politics of a people tells you a lot about what the people accept.
Right.
About what the people expect. So you're talking about the negative and the positive creativity. Another aspect of negative creativity is the way in which we use our traditions for negative purposes. We tell stories, tribal stories against one another.
Right.
The Civil War came out of the negative creativity of stories and narratives and ways of perceiving one another that demonized, and Rwanda, same thing. Negative stories, negative perceptions, negative ways of using this power of perceiving people. So these are things we have to be aware of it.
Right.
We have to be aware that negative creativity has tremendous consequences on a people and on generations.
And so I think this might be a good time to turn to some of your work and maybe hear a little bit, because I think, for example, Tiger Work, one of your most recent books of poems, right, it's looking at some of this, both the positive and the negative creativity. And so I think maybe if we can hear a little bit and then move on from there.
Yeah, I liked your point earlier about crass capitalism as being, in its way, a kind of negative creativity. And our world has been, the things we're most worried about right now, and we're worried about many things, but I think the biggest, increasingly, has become climate. And the curious thing about the climate crisis, is that, finally it's about us. It's about consequence. It comes down to the very things that novelists value more than anything else, which is a profound understanding of the power of consequences. If you do this, it gives rise to this. And if you don't do anything about this at this point, it will give rise to 2 of this. And this will give rise to 3 of this, and so on. There's a kind of compounding of consequences.
Right.
Which is what we're living through. We're living through the compounded consequences of not respecting our planet. So I'm going to read a couple of lines from a poem called The Broken. Tiger work is made up of many pieces: stories, poems, interviews, letters, all around the theme of climate. This earth that we love is in grave danger because of us. We have raped, exploited, abused, wrecked, disemboweled, and destroyed her. We blow her up, we blast her apart, we detonate atomic bombs on her, we poison her. The oceans are acidic. The rising mouths of the sea would devour men on their lunch breaks, women at their desks, children wandering home from school. Chemicals in the water, greenhouse emissions, throttling time. Leaking landfills, batteries, and plastic, hydrocarbons, and cows, and sterile yield of crops will kill millions. Trees are disappearing. Forests are becoming legends. We have thrown distressing facts at people: numbers, temperatures, loss of species. Year by year, pollination slows down. And still we drive fossil fuel cars, make flights around the world, and consume vast amounts of energy. Facts don't alter our dreams or change our minds. We can't retrace the track from the cave to the spaceship. We can't undo the air conditioner or the computer. We can't walk backwards from space stations to the club or spear, from the oven back to the boomerang. Nobody wants to turn back civilization's clock. No one wants to regress. Fear doesn't work. Guilt doesn't work. So I thought maybe love could shift our vision, shift our breath. Maybe if we all do something modest and the dead land can yield roses again. Perhaps we've grown too complicated for our own good. I think love is the highest economy of life. If we woke up to our love for the earth, we stop doing most of the things we're doing. In the Tao Te Ching, there's a light cram passage which says that the sage loves the world as they love their body. If the earth were our body, would we do half the things to it that we're doing? Take a nuclear blast to the kidney, smash the heart with metal spikes, frack the intestines, mine the brain with explosive rain. Nothing can save our world but love. For love is the last power that stands between us and extinction. I want to be careful how I read these things. I miss the old taste of oranges. I miss breathing air without fumes, without hydrocarbons. These pollutions have been altering us and degrading our flesh, our hearts, our spines. We live longer but suffer more diseases. I miss clean streams without sewage from our water corporations. I miss rivers so clear you can see stones on their watery beds and fishes with their bright gills hovering in the cool, clean currents. I miss air so pure that every breath feels like paradise. I miss the taste of food that's so good it returns you to your lost childhood. I miss long walks that don't sicken you with carbon dioxide that you breathe unknown. I miss the clear blue of the sky. Our world is being powered by death. We have not reached the true potential of the human. We still stand with our feet in the old kingdom of Hades, where the long dead trees and bones of mammoth beings hold up the foundation of our children's worlds. We are neck deep in the oil slime of Western civilization. We are mouth deep in detritus. We're sleepwalking in suits and skirts. The fossil fuel revolution has been making the planet mad. Plants are screaming. The sycamore trees cry for eternal cleansing. And I said to the earth, be still. Yield up no more dead force that's trapped in coal or oil or cinnabar or magnesium or asbestos or cobalt or tantalum or lithium. And I said to the sun, teach us to utilize those endless rays.
I think that's it. So I want to ask in this time, there's a certain, how do I ask this? There's a certain exactness in the work. And it's almost a dispensing with metaphor to just get straight to it. And I'm wondering, oh, wait a second.
I'm gonna get us. I'm gonna get us.
Exactly. And I'm wondering if in this moment of what is essentially or can be billed as, and counter if you don't think it's true, but if we're in a moment of annihilation, self-caused or other, does that also mean that some of it's necessary for creativity to move towards exactness to deal with the enormity of what it is we're seeing?
I wrote an essay about that in the book called Existential Creativity. I don't want to read it out here because it will take up too much time. It's a short essay. If you get the book, you should read it. But you know, like I told you about physics earlier, you know, let's be rigorous in our thinking. If you have a worrying intuition that you've been messing around with the world so much that either you undergo a profound transformation pretty fast, or you carry on towards death. Yeah? And you've got to that fork in the road. There's not much time left. Time has been taken away from you. And you want to write. What do you do if you feel you don't have much time left? And you want to make an account of what is really, really important? What happens to your writing? This is the question I've been asking myself. What happens to your writing when suddenly you find yourself, possibly, if you're not careful, in the last great chapter of the human story, which is where we are, if we're not careful? What happens to your writing? Does your writing, if you are truthful, do you now move towards the absolute essence, the absolute truthfulness of what you want to say? Or do you say, well, F it. I don't have time anyway. I'm going to write the most beautiful, the most gorgeous, the richest sentences loaded with metaphor and beauty that I can find. And if the life takes me in the middle of that perfect paragraph, then so be it.
Right.
It depends on your temperament. For me, it's led me towards essentials.
Right. Towards this exactness,
Towards absolute exactness.
Right.
I think we need to get rid of waste. I really think we need to be more Spartan. I think what is happening to us is just is waste. It's the tragedy of waste. You know, such fertility. Capitalism has revealed that we're incredibly fertile beings. And what do we do with our fertility? We destroy the planet that we need to live on with it. It's waste. We need to stop being so wasteful. We need to be more economical. We use too much energy. We just use up too much.
Right.
You know, in Nigeria, you know, those flares of we burn up millions of barrels of oil, crude every day. We just burn them up every day. We've been doing it now for 50 years.
Right. Right. No, I see that, and I understand that. But now let's ask about who wastes, and it's these ideas of equity and justice and the reshaping of how we think about who wastes, who has a right to waste, and whether there's any path forward there.
I think we all waste. Some people waste more than others. Absolutely. The Western world. You know, when I came to England the second time as a kid, when I came to write, and I learned about the hundreds of thousands of kilos of food that they threw away every day, just in one country. They just throw away such amount of food. I was pretty shocked. People equate richness, wealth with waste. There's no relationship between the two things. We need to. I think we need to redefine what true wealth is, and I think we need to redefine what it means to be human.
Right.
I really think so.
So I want to ask you about love, but before that, I think if we could have a little bit from the last gift of the gift of the master.
I want to go back to your original question of African creativity.
Okay.
Because that's what this book, The Last Gift of the Master Artist, is about. I've been haunted by the possibilities of creativity since I began writing, and since I came upon the first great African sculpting that I saw at the Museum of African Art in Lagos, which is these sculptings that come from Calabar, from the Calabar between the intersection between the Calabar people and the Igbo people, the Efik people. They have these sculptings, very strange sculptings that the people discovered that were in the ground, and over time slowly got revealed. They're the very strange, very minimal markings, no hands, or the hands are drawn on the sculpting itself. And the sculpting is like a little mound. And I first saw this in Lagos, and actually, if anything really changed my sense of the possibility of our art and our literature, it was those sculptings that I saw when I was about 19, just before I came to London. And that's what this book is about in many ways. It's a story of Africa before the slave trade, before the event that, in a sense, broke an aspect of our psyche. And it begins like this. This is a story my mother began to tell me when I was a child and never finished. The rest was gleaned from the book of life among the stars, where all things are known. I'll come back to that first sentence. In the heart of the kingdom, there was a place where the earth was black and sweet to taste. Everything planted there grew profusely. The village was built in the shape of a circle. In the center of the circle stood the palace of the king. There was a thick forest around the village. 4 rivers met in the forest. The shrine house was at the rim of the village, and a path ran past it from the outside world. Those who dwelt in the heart of the kingdom lived in a magic dream, an oasis of huts and good harvests in the midst of an enveloping world of trees. There's a saying from the village that my mother used to tell me. It's not who you are that makes the world respect you, but the power that stands behind you. It is not you that the world sees, but that power. The village was small, but behind it, around it, stood the majesty of the forest. I'll skip forward and read another little passage. But before I do, I want to go back to that sentence, that opening sentence. This is a story my mother began to tell me. Well, it's true. When I was a kid, my mom began to tell me this story about an ancestor who disappeared. He was a prince. He was handsome. He was intelligent. He was bright. He was a hope of the kingdom. And one day he just disappeared. They never found him, never found any trace of him, couldn't work out where he had gone. This is a story that had been passed on from mother to daughter down through the ages. She began to tell me this story. Ben, do you know, did I ever tell you about my ancestor? He's a prince. One day he disappeared. Hang on, the soup is, let me go. So she goes off to the kitchen to sort out the soup. I'm waiting. Something else happens. She doesn't finish the story. A couple of months go by. Mom, that story, yes, Ben, did I tell you the story of my ancestor who, hang on. She never finished the story. And then one day I grew up and came to England. And then one day she passed away and left me with this unfinished story. So I did some research. And the research led to this. The point of my telling you this story is my mother had an understanding of the way my mind works. If she wanted to, if I was bad and I did something wrong, she wouldn't tell me off. She would tell me a story, but the story will have no point. Ben, you just knocked over that glass. Did I ever tell you a story about a tortoise who one day, and the story has no relationship to the glass I'd knocked over. And I'd spent years trying to work out why she had told me this story. That is African creativity. She understood my mind. You tell him a story that doesn't make any sense, and he will try and work it out, and he will think about it, and he will correct himself. If I tell him a story about the thing itself that I want him to do, he will be bored because the story has a point. This novel is about the power of unfinished stories and how it is our job to finish them.
Can we hear a little more?
You want to hear a little more?
Can we hear a little more?
The prince is a man of innocence and sensitivity. One day he goes to the farm and he sees the women working at the farm, and he watches them. They've been working from early in the morning before anybody else has woken up. They work and then they go back and then they make food for the house. And then they go to the river. Then they wash the clothes of everybody. And then they come back and they make food in the evening. And then they they go look after relations, and they come back, and they're the last ones to go to sleep, and they're the first to wake up. And he said, what kind of life is this? He went to the king and he said, the king, my father, what kind of life is this that our women lead? Anyway, he told the king this, and the chief custodian of the kingdom stepped in and had to correct the prince. And this is what he had to say. Your Royal Highness, the prince and the women have not told you the whole story. Women are the secret movers of the kingdom. Men rule by day, women rule by night. Night is more magical. Men perform deeds in public, women undo them in private. Men make history, women make legend. Legend lasts longer. Men conquer bodies, women conquer hearts. The heart guides the world. Men think, women dream. Dreams create the future. Men think they rule the world, but find the world has turned into water. Women understand that water. Men make laws, women make ways. Men know death, but women know life. The chief custodian paused. The king watched the prince, who had his head tilted, as though he were listening to music. The custodian, lowering his voice, continued. If men make mistakes, thousands die. If women make mistakes, a whole tribe perishes. Men can be stupid, and the world will not fall down. But if women are stupid, the world comes to an end. It is important that women are wise. The greatness of a people is a tribute to the greatness of its women. There's two sides to what the custodian said. He too was playing politics while telling the truth.
So let's go back to this idea then of love, which I think is something that you're getting at in both of these works. But you, in the first poems you read, you very sort of explicitly went to this idea of love as being the force that will transform our world. And I want to talk about that in opposition to, say, I don't know, electric vehicles or solar power or any of these other more capitalistic understandings of what we need to do to quote unquote live a better life.
What's your question?
It's a more of a, what's your thought on that?
Oh, you think love is not practical?
I'm not saying it's not practical, and I wouldn't argue that, but I'm asking you to maybe go deeper into this idea of love as a practical force.
Well, if you look at it very, very deeply, the quality of our creativity, whether it's the creativity of our industries, whether it's the creativity of our innovation.
One second. Can we, is it possible to, thank you. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Where was I?
You were talking about the creativity of love, that connection.
If you look at it really deeply, creativity, whether it's the creativity of our innovations, of our industries, of our marketplaces, the creativity of our economics, the creativity of our governance, it all depends on the quality of love that animates it. Finally. So for me, love and creativity, love and governance. Why will you govern how can you govern your people properly if you don't truly love them? Why would you govern them properly if you didn't truly love them? You know, we think love is just an emotion. Love is the guiding principle of everything that we do. You know, I take such trouble over my sentences over the short stories I write. Sometimes I write a short story 17 times. It's not because I kind of like inflicting that kind of damage on myself. It's because I have a kind of profound love for the person who is going to read that story. And I want the story to say the most profound and the most beautiful and the most humorous thing it is capable of saying in the shortest amount of time.
Right.
So in a way, really, finally, love animates the works of our hands. Finally. You know what? Love works through reason. You know, you take the trouble to think more clearly when you're educating your children. Yeah. So for me, it's not an impractical thing. It is the people who really want to shape our world for the better. It's because they care about it. They care about it enough that they want to go and affect it in a positive way, even when they're gone.
Right.
They care beyond their death. That's the kind of care, and that's the kind of love, that's the kind of governance that we need in Africa, and that we need right now in this world, everywhere. We need it in America.
Right.
You know, when you see people of a party, they see their leader is completely mad and he's saying things that's against the Constitution and the people and the government and the possibility of the nation, and they go on supporting this leader just because they care more about their positions in Senate or wherever it is than they care about the nation itself.
Right.
That is not love. That is self-interest. Yeah?
Right.
So for me, love is immensely practical. It is the most practical thing. It's just that we don't translate it enough. You know, when scientists take trouble with their experiments, that too is love. It's love of science. It's love of truth.
Right.
So
that is the practicality, the force of love.
yeah.
I think you said something in there about reshaping the world or changing the path of the world. And I think maybe that's a good place to come to a final reading from Changing Destiny. And let's maybe hear a little bit of that, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions.
Actually, what I wanted to read from Changing Destiny, which is a play I wrote, it was staged in, it was kind of written over the pandemic, and staged just as the pandemic ended in the Young Vic in London. And it's the oldest story in the world. It's 4,000 years old, comes from ancient Egypt. And it's a story of Sinuhe. And I found this story and I was really intrigued and a bit mystified that the Egyptians would have a story that is outside the whole idea of kingship and the pharaoh and all of that. And it's the story of a man who saw that the pharaoh was screwing up Egypt, and they began to plot to get rid of him. And it's the first time you actually heard of this kind of pharaohicide, regicide. Anyway, he failed, or we don't know whether he actually did take part in it or not. Then he had to run away. And it's a story, therefore, of exile. It's a story of migration. It's a modern story of our times, 4,000 years ago. I was very fascinated, so I wrote a play about it. And I'm just going to read the prelude. I think this play went through about, 20 drafts. It was about this big when I began it. And we compressed it to that. Just 50 pages.
Wow.
Sinuhe, dreamily to the audience. Other civilizations will light their torches from the celestial blaze of our mother civilization, spirit. They will get their gods from us, Sinuhe. They will suckle at the teats of our mythology, spirit. Their sages will learn philosophy at the feet of our priests, Sinuhe. Their temples and their art will be borrowed from our dregs. Spirit. We are the initiation chamber for future civilizations. Sinuhe. The world will forever wonder at how we rose from nothing to this exalted place in the history of human achievements. Spirit. What is the secret of the greatness of the land? Sinuhe and spirit. We activate the full dimensions of the human spirit.
I think that's a really wonderful place to end and to bring it home. I think let's open up. Do we have another mic for the audience? If not, then I can give mine. I think you should probably keep yours. Okay, great. There's another mic. And what we'll do is we'll take questions from the audience. I will ask that you ask a question, out of respect for all of your other folks who have questions. And I also will cut you off if you are not asking a question. Just giving you fair warning now. All right, so who has the first question?
But sometimes people might not have a question. They might just want to express a moment.
I have been overruled.
But do it briefly.
Quickly.
I'm taking a risk, right? Okay. So can we teach love and should we teach love then in this case?
In where?
Can love be taught? Or should we do that?
So can we teach love? Or
Wow.
should we teach love?
Wow, what a question.
That's the Africa Center for you.
What a question. We should teach love. I'm not sure love can be taught. I'm not sure love can be taught. Love can be inspired. Love can be taught about. Love can be conveyed in stories and parables and fables. But love itself, you can't teach it. You can only inspire it. You can only bring it out. You can only show its effect and its power, what it means, what it is. I think love comes from people who have been given love. And people who haven't been given love, sometimes they don't know what it is. I've met people in this life who said to me, I grew up, I became an adult and I never knew what love was. And I said, what do you mean you never know what love was? And they say, I just don't know what love is. I've been amazed when people have said this to me and they've been very serious. So what do I say to this person? How do I tell them what love is? You can't. You just have to navigate them, get them to a place where they one day they'll see somebody and something will happen to their entire being. And they won't be able to talk for 5 minutes. And I'll go up to them and whisper, this is it.
Let's take another question in the back here. Oh, sorry. Well, we'll go here and then I'll come to you in the back.
Thank you so much for this talk. My question is very quick and practical, I hope. In terms of, you spoke about the African spirit. For you, where do you locate it? Where do you locate what you call the African spirit?
Well, it's bring two Africans together and put some food between them, and it'll emerge. It's there in our dances, it's there in our music, it's there in our storytelling, it's there in the gestures of our mother, it's there in the silence of our fathers, it's there in the land itself. It's in our dreams, it's in our conversation, it's in the way we jest with one another. It's in our art, but more than that, it's in the way we are with one another. It's the way we are with family. It's the way this kid who lost his mother and lost his father came to live in our house. After 5 years, he was a brother. He was a brother. That's the African spirit. Just extended the idea of family to include those who have come into the stream of your lives and you have gone into the stream of their lives. It's how do you locate it? You can't locate it. It's a vast thing. It's as vast as Africa itself. It's not something that can be, dissected. It's in our playfulness. Listen to our elders talk. They say one thing and they mean 5 things. That's the African spirit. Sometimes even a sound like you could interpret that in 15 different ways. Mom, can I go watch a movie with my friend? What does she mean? Yes, but it starts you thinking. It's much bigger than that. Oh, yes, you can. So you have to weigh yourself. Am I going to do this responsibly? Would mom approve of it? Do you understand what I'm saying? The African spirit is collaborative in a mysterious way. It's suggestive. It's incredibly suggestive. It's poetic in the sense that it's very economical. One thing does 5 jobs. I could write a long essay about it.
Let's take, I think, all the way in the back here. All the way.
Yeah.
All right, you got it? Okay.
Yes, I got one. Hi. Yes, the lady earlier was asking about how do you teach love? Can you teach love? And I had a similar question in some ways to her. I was going to ask you. I was going to say you were saying how the only way things can work out is if we love one another. And I was thinking, a lot of people when they're growing up, they're told, "Hey, I love you," by their parents, by someone in their family. But some folks, although they're told that behaviorally and emotionally, parents, they're disconnected from their feelings themselves. They can't connect with their child with that level of love that you talk of. And so it got me thinking of a question similar to hers, which was how do you inspire it? And you said, hopefully we can point it out in the moment where, hey, this is what love is. And so and I want to offer another alternative if possible, which is perhaps we can embody love. So that way, the only way to understand is to experience it. And so perhaps we can embody it ourselves and experience it with them, and they'll know, and they can feel that within each other and us.
Okay.
So just wanted to offer that thought.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Embodying is good. Embodying is good. Embodying is tough, but it's good. Thank you. Anybody else?
So I don't have a fully formed question,
I like that.
but
Half formed is good too.
I really like, I'm gonna make it quick. I love your short story book, Prayer for the Living. So I just would want you, if you could talk about it, and if you could even talk about that specific short story, Prayer for the Living, but anything that you could or would want to say about it is my question.
Okay, thank you. Prayer for the Living is a book of stories that I published about 3-4 years ago. And all the stories, about 17 stories, all the stories are they move around the theme of praying for the living. Sometimes the praying for the living is coming from the dead. Well, what can I say about it? It's one of my best books of stories. It's people don't know how seriously I take the short story form. I mean, if you ask me, I say to people, the short story is the hardest. After the sonnet, it's the hardest literary form. It's the hardest because you have to tell all the truth you want to tell about a single situation in great brevity. You've got to say so much in such a little space. You can't keep going on and on. Every single word has to count. And that volume is thank you for bringing it up, but it is one of the most important things I've written. And the title story is about, it's set in Ethiopia. Is it Ethiopia or Somalia? During
I couldn't figure out what country it was. I don't.
yeah, I sort of took it from both of those countries, and it's based on a real incident during a sort of a famine that came about because of the warlords in the region. And it's about this girl and her boyfriend who came looking for her and found her among the dead. And that's what the story is really about. It's about the dead. It's about the dead singing to the living, for the living, praying for us, because they're fine, but we're not.
We'll take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take one more question.
I'll take 3 questions and combine it into one answer.
Okay, we'll see if we can do that, because I also want to make sure we have some time for your signing, which I will talk about. So we'll compromise and we'll do 2 questions and combine into one answer. So question 1, question 2.
Mine will be long.
I don't know about all that. I don't know about that. Let's see if we can condense it, because I really do. I think we want to give people the chance to get books signed.
I'll be fast as well.
Okay.
Congratulations on your awards. I just read up about you. That you won Book of Fiction in 1991. Congress. I'm from Nigeria, and I also like the aspects you discussed about creativity, both from the negative and then the positive. And then it reminds me of the contributions of writers towards our independence, both through the prose, novels, and then even newspapers that champion the independence. However, I'm lost right now because somehow there are some writers who look up to in Nigeria who we actually expect to stand on the path of truth. But then their whole contributions and then their support seems to be on the opposite direction. So what word do you have for such writers without anyone in mind who is on this path? And then how are we to realize the path that Africa is meant to be? Especially your last short story.
Okay, so wait, let me.
That's a good point
Yeah,
for the question to end. That's
exactly. I
That's
think
a
that's a
good
good.
point.
So should we take the second one?
Your short
So
story.
we're gonna stop with that, because I think that first question actually is really powerful.
It's a very powerful.
So we'll pause on that and then maybe ask the second one, and then you'll answer both.
Yeah, I think actually his question goes hand in hand with mine, actually. I was introduced to your work in a really violent way. My dad just walked up to me when I was about 6 and just slammed your book on my table. And he said, "Read this," and he walked out the door.
Oh dear.
And the book was, so this is pretty surreal for me. The book was Flowers and Shadows,
Oh wow.
which I remember reading at the time, but I completely forgotten about it until now. And so the question I wanted to ask you was what, and also hearing from what you were talking about today, what compelled you as a young Nigerian adult to dedicate, seems, your life to writing text that's both trying to heal young, old, living, and dead all at once? What compelled you to write in this style?
Wow. I need some palm wine.
All right, so let's try that without naming any names. Let's try that first question about Nigerian writers in the service of politics or anti-politics, and then this idea of healing and the compelling nature of your writing.
Everybody has to follow their own truth. You have to. There's not much you can do about that, but people have to follow their own truth. And if their own truth leads them to telling lies, then they have to carry that. But we don't have to. You can always choose. You don't have to get upset about what one writer does. You know, if you feel they're not telling the truth that you see that they can be telling, you're wasting your energy getting upset with them. Read somebody else who is telling the truth. And if they're not doing it, then if you can't find anybody who's telling the truth that you want to hear, then it is quite clear that the universe is calling upon you to dedicate yourself on that road. If no one is telling the truth that you need to hear, that you want to hear, then you have to tell it, or sing it, or dance it, or paint it. You know, writing is a great act of conscience and love. And I had a really, I'm just gonna break down it for a minute here with you. I had a really strange experience the other day in Boston. I was at a dinner, friends, people I didn't know. This person suddenly turned to me and said, you know, one day I went to meet this famous, great writer, Caribbean writer. I went to his house, and he, very famous, and he was living in a bedsit. And I said, oh, if this writer is so famous, and he's living in a bedsit, I don't think I want to be a writer. So he did something else and became very good at it, very successful, and that's fine. But he missed the point. That writer was not writing for the reasons that he thought that he was writing for. He was writing not to get a bigger house. If that came along, great. But that's not why he was writing. He was writing for truth and beauty, to draw attention to the suffering that he was seeing, to draw attention to the injustice that was being carried out on his people, to draw attention to the blindness of his people who choose one way that is not so good for them and for the economy and for their civilization, rather than another way. That's what he was doing. That's what we do. You know, you dedicate yourself to something, to an art, and you don't necessarily get rewarded for it. So many of the writers I love and admire, you know, they died penniless. Some of them died mad. But they're still with us. They still inspire us. They inspire our children. And they go on inspiring. It doesn't matter whether they failed in their life. So what I'm trying to say to you is, you know, it's a matter of conscience. It's a matter of why you're doing it. Some of us do it for it and for the world, and we don't give a damn what happens to us. Yeah, so you have to choose. You have to choose your light, and you have to choose the bearers of light. You have to find them. Don't grumble about the people who are bearing darkness. Look for people who are bearing light. Yeah.
And then maybe let's close out.
I think I've half answered your question, really. I was a kid. My dad's life, as I said earlier, took a bit of a tumble. We lived on the edges of respectability and the ghetto. A real plunge, you know. And for a kid, that really, for my father, it was very difficult for him. It's not easy for your life to fall. But for the children, it's a killer. You know, because one day you're with friends and their cars, and the next day you're in a ghetto. But actually for me, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It opened up my heart. It just, suddenly I saw the real people of the earth. You know, I saw the people. I saw how they lived. I saw where they slept. I saw their toilets. I saw how they waded to work in the morning. I'm using the word waded here because of potter and when it rains, you know, there are no roads anymore. It's marsh. You're wading to work. People roll their trousers all the way up to here, you know, and they carry a little bottle to sort of wash their legs and then jump into a bus. I saw all of that. Exploded my life. It was as if the universe threw me there to open up my heart and to see the world as it is and to speak for it in some way. So my father's fall in many ways was my blessing. I got to see how landlords, would throw out a family of 10 living in one room. Say, I want a bigger rent. You can't afford it, out. And we just have people come and just chuck their things out into the rain. Family of 10, mother with 2 children on her, either arm, out in the rain, and they just do that, and then put a bachelor who can afford the bigger rent there. They just do that. And I saw this stuff. Now, my first article I wrote was exactly about that, because I thought the laws should be changed. That's how I started. I started from that, and I haven't really stopped.
Thank you. So on that note, I just want to first say that Ben will be signing books in the back. There are books for purchase, so please, in the front, my bad. You can purchase in the back, and then in the front here, Ben will be here to sign. Remember that. I also want to thank all of you for spending the evening with us here at the Africa Center. And I want to thank you, Ben, for your words, for your wisdom, for your writing, for your creativity, and for the inspiration that you have given us this evening. This is exactly what we're about at the center. It's about this kind of conversation that blends all of the aspects of who we are as Africans, as diaspora people, with the world at large. And we're so grateful that you were able to bring that to us today, and that you continue to bring that to the wider world. So thank you very much.
And I want to thank you for the great work you're doing here, for transforming the perception that people have of Africa, which is the work that we should all be doing. Thank you all very much.
A round of applause, please. And don't forget, please pick up books in the back, and Ben will be here to sign in the front. Thank you all very much. Thank you so much.
I never know. No one knows. Little Sudan, I think I can let go.
Home isn't just where we're from. It's the sounds that move us. The stories that shape us. And the flavors that heal us. It's the communities that connect us. The ones that hold us down. The ones that raise us up. Home is a feeling we all know. So if you're looking for it, you can always find it here. The Africa Center. Home is here.